Good afternoon and welcome to ARC 313, Watercolor in Quarantine. This is week 5. We're going to be learning some rendering techniques today. This is the video number 11. By now you should have sketched out our sketch of the day, which is the Villa Savoie by Le Corbusier in Poissy, just outside of Paris. I added, in addition to this sketch of the day, I added a few little shrubs in the bottom. You'll see why a little bit later. The sketch of the day is going to look something like this in the end. We're going to learn sky, foreground foliage, shrubbery with some flowers, background foliage, and then next week we'll get into the building and shades and shadows. So why don't you come over here and we'll get started. So the first step that I always take is to paint the sky first, because the sky is something that you might have to mess around with a little bit in a wet on wet sort of way. And so you want to do it first, so you're not all done with the rendering and then screw it up at the end with the sky. So what we first do is take the painting, turn it upside down, and then I'm going to paint with just clear water everything that's going to be the sky. So you have to be careful because you can't see exactly what you're doing right now because you're painting without color. You're just painting with clear water. That's the other reason why we do this first, so we have absolutely clear water in our tray and clear water on our brush as well. You don't want to have been just doing a bunch of pink stuff and then go in to paint your sky and it's all pink or orange or whatever the case may be. So now that I've got it started, I'm going to just keep painting out all of this in clear water. Take it out as far as you want to have sky. So if you don't want to necessarily paint the whole frame, just take it to as close as you can to the edge there and get it all wet. Let it sit for just a little bit. And in the meantime, we'll get started with some color. Whatever color you want to go with for your sky. You could go with a French ultramarine, or I'm using a cerulean blue, Antwerp blue, Payne's gray if it's kind of a cloudy, rainy day. Whatever you want. You could even do a sunset color. But I'm getting my brush ready for the blue that I'm going to add here. In this case, cerulean blue. And I'm using a sable brush because I want this to be kind of loose and really want to focus on getting the wet technique going. So I'm going to start by just throwing down some color. I'm going to let it bleed into the rest of the painting. Notice how I'm painting the closest to the building first, as well as close to the background foliage. Just trying to get the heavier contrast closer to the subject matter. I'm just painting everything that I can here, and then letting it kind of bleed out and start forming some of the other clouds. You might try and create some definition up higher too, if you want. Let that bleed out too, so that you can kind of create this sense of poofiness and clouds up there. And they're just kind of creating themselves. All you're doing is setting up the potential to happen and then letting it do its thing. It's quite common that you won't like how it's going the first go around. And that's okay. You just add more water and do it again. A lot of times it takes me about 3 times to get the sky just the way I want it. And you just can't be averse to jumping in and redoing it. Also, if you don't like the way the clouds are looking, you can kind of make them yourself with a paper towel. You can kind of create your own little poofiness. This gives you a little bit harder edge on the cloud. So if you like the kind of bleeding effect, then don't use the paper towel. But if you want to get a little bit of a hard edge going on your clouds, you can just blot out what you want to be cloud. And voila. Okay, so we're going to let that dry, but we'll keep an eye on it because if it's not drying the way we want, we're going to add more water. And we're going to move into some foliage now. So at this point, put this away, and I'm going to ask you to get out another piece of paper and draw some trees on here. So I'm going to show you how I do the foliage. I've got one sort of normative tree going on here. I've got some smaller evergreens in the background up there. I've got some columnar trees going here on the left margin. I drew some shrubbery down here at the bottom, and I've got some people as well, just sketched out. We do most of the work with the color. So the first thing I do when I'm working on the foliage is I develop about 3 different types of greens, and I mix them myself by mixing blue and yellow to give me a range of blues. One is a range of greens from super light green, almost yellow, to a medium green that's kind of like an olive, and a dark green that's more like an evergreen. So I usually don't use these fresh out of the tray. I usually make my own. So in this case, I'm taking a dark yellow here and mixing it with my blue to give me a kind of a medium olive green. This is kind of equal parts blue and yellow. Over here, I'm going to keep this as my lighter sort of chartreuse green, staying away from the red part there. And then in the middle here, I'm going to go with a darker green, sort of an evergreen, which includes some Payne's gray in the mix to darken it up, as well as some blue and some yellow to give it a little bit more greenery. So that's our evergreen color. This is our olive green. And we can use these two here for our lighter yellowish greens. So the first thing I do, we'll start from left to right, is I paint out the highlights, the tops of the trees, in this kind of chartreuse. A little bit more of a yellowy green. And then right after that, I paint out the bottom, which is this heavier, darker green. Needs a little bit more Payne's gray to darken it up. And if two trees are kind of touching, I might throw in a shadow in there too. But I'm kind of hitting the bottom of the tree because that's what's in shadow, if you will. And then I mix the two together with this more middle green. And I just mix them right on the page so that the wet on wet approach creates some interesting mushroom blooms, cauliflower ears, happy mistakes, if you will. Same with, as with sky, in the foliage, you might need to do it a couple of times. So you have to watch it, make sure it's drying the way you want. And if it's not, just go ahead and add more water and start over again. These look like they're off to a good start though. So I'll let those dry over here, keeping an eye on them. Let's see how this is drying. Not looking too bad. I think I don't want to make any changes as of yet, but I'll keep an eye on it. It's still drying, so some things might happen that are cause for alarm, and I'll switch it up. So it's the same approach now with the more normative tree. We'll go. And the cat is trying to help out with the painting too. We'll go through the tops with this yellow. Oh. You can't let your cats step on your paintings while they're wet, because I've had plenty of paintings messed up from the cats. And then the darker down here at the bottom of this tree. It's the same process. And then mixing it together with this middle green. Again, the goal is to try and get some staining happening in there and some things that you can't create on your own, but you have to just let the watercolor paint do. And also with foliage, sometimes you let it dry and it looks pretty good, but you want to just add a little bit more. So you can come in afterwards and do a wet on dry as well, if it hasn't dried exactly the way you want. Okay, so we'll let that sit for a little bit. Okay, then evergreens are the easiest. In this case, you just take your darker green and just fill out the whole tree. This is good if you're doing like you've got a forest in the background. You just want to draw a bunch of background evergreens, pines, fir, redwoods, whatever the case may be with your particular biome. But see how we're just kind of hitting it with this darker green. Et voila. How much time have we done on the video so far?
12 minutes.
12 minutes? Okay.
Almost 13.
So this would be a good place to stop. I'm going to let this dry a little bit, and then we're going to come back in a sec with video 12 to finish this off. See you in a bit.